Stormtrooper armor is ubiquitous in Star Wars lore. The sight of these white armored troopers instilled fear into the hearts of dissidents and the enemies of the Empire. Today we're going to be taking a look at this suit of armor and talk about how it evolved from earlier Old Republic and Sith Empire designs. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, BetterHelp. Now, there is a stigma in this country about getting therapy. People believe that it's only for those with mental illness. But we all have problems and issues we would like to discuss regardless of what our mental health state is. Sometimes therapy is just a healthy way to unload whatever emotions or thoughts you have building up in your head. I personally belong to two demographic groups that statistically neglect their mental health care. As an Asian American, I'm 3 times less likely to seek therapy than the general population. And as a man, I'm much less likely to seek help than compared to a woman. I'm also much more likely to self-medicate. Also, as an American, navigating our complicated and expensive healthcare system can be extremely intimidating and confusing. Needless to say, there are a lot of obstacles limiting my ability to get some mental health care. And so let me introduce to you guys BetterHelp. It's the world's largest therapy service and it's 100% online. BetterHelp can connect you with their network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists. The whole process takes place over the phone or through messages, and once you connect with a therapist that you like, you can schedule live sessions whenever it is convenient for you. You'll get the same professionalism and quality you can expect with in-office therapy, but with lower prices and a much more streamlined and easier process in finding the right therapist for you. Get 10% off of your first month of BetterHelp by using our link in the description below. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. Emperor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, was a cultured man. Hailing from an aristocratic family and also being the apprentice of Darth Plagueis, the Sith Lord developed a love for ancient Sith and Jedi artifacts. It was said that the wedge-shaped Star Destroyers that were used by the Imperial Navy were influenced by ancient Sith designs like the Harrower-class Star Dreadnought. I've also heard rumors that the triangle shape of these vessels weren't just about efficient placement of turbo laser batteries, but about channeling dark side energy. Think Sith holocrons and temples. The Sith really like the strength of pyramids and triangles. And so, as you can see, the Sith put a lot of thought behind their designs and they try to align it to the dark side as much as possible. Now, in order to get to the root of the Stormtrooper armor design, we have to venture all the way back to the Old Republic period. This was an extremely chaotic time in galactic history, full of 1,000-year conflicts and 1,000-year periods of darkness. Now, the details from this period of time are pretty murky and mostly considered legends, but if you take a close look at some of these ancient Old Republic designs, you'll notice some very stark similarities with the stuff we see in the more modern eras of Star Wars. For instance, take this Corellian Engineering Corporation and Rendeli Star Drive Serena-class Hammerhead Corvette. It was used as a picket ship by the Rebel Alliance, but close to 5,000 years earlier, Rendeli Hyperworks rolled out ships like the Hammerhead-class cruiser, which became the main capital ship of the Old Republic for several thousands of years. Now back to the armor. So during the Old Republic period, the federal military was always underfunded and under-equipped, especially during times of peace. Without a permanent or well-maintained military-industrial complex, there were periods of time when the Republic just had to rely on some very basic protection. The Sith Empire also had some issues with their industrial capabilities, and this is because their society was more or less structured like a feudal system. You had Sith Lords who controlled planets or large swaths of land, and they had peasants and slaves working beneath them. It's hardly an efficient system at producing goods on a large scale. And so the Sith and Republic armor from this time didn't really look all that different from what we see here on Earth during the Bronze Age. It wasn't standardized at all, and it offered some basic protection. But then something would happen around 5,000 years before the Galactic Civil War starts. The armor technology started getting better. You started seeing more synthetic materials being used in suits of armor that were specifically designed to reflect or absorb thermal energy. There also was more of a standardization when it came to factional armor. The Republic Army started rolling out kit that looked quite similar in appearance to what the Rebel Alliance wore during the Galactic Civil War. That means relatively light body armor with helmets that don't offer full face protection. These armor designs remind me more of something you might see with corporate security rather than hardened infantry units. But then the Mandalorian Wars occurred. The Mandalorians were a very warlike people. As a group, they committed a great deal of resources into inventing and improving weapons and armor designs. The Mandalorians really valued their armor a lot, so much so that a lot of their cultures and traditions surrounded the Mandalorian armor. The Mandalorians were wearing full-plate armor with covered helmets thousands of years before anyone else was doing it. In 3976, Mandalore the Ultimate, who was under Sith control, launched a great crusade against the rest of the galaxy. Usually crusades have some religious goal or purpose behind them. For the Mandalorians, their crusade was just about taking land and proving to other species that they were better. The neo-crusaders, as the Mandalorians were called during this period, were earlier versions of the Mandalorian armor that are easy to recognize today thanks to their famous T-shaped visor design. Now, the Old Republic would avoid contact with these neo-crusaders for at least a decade. They just didn't want to get involved in this war. But then finally, the neo-crusaders attacked the populated Yoseminopolis world of Taurus, forcing the Republic into action. When the Old Republic engaged the Mandalorians, they were still wearing that goofy orange armor we talked about before. Now, despite having a much smaller force, the Mandalorians started routing the Republic military. It wasn't really until the Jedi and his revanchist movement jumped into the fray that the Republic started turning the tide against the Mandalorians. I believe the Mandalorians' fearsome fighting abilities and success in the opening years of the Mandalorian Wars had a huge impression on the many factions fighting against them. After the Mandalorian Wars ends, the Jedi Civil War starts, and Revan would actually lead an entire army of Sith troopers against the Republic. These Sith troopers wore full-body armor with a distinctive silver and white reflective surface, good for protection from energy weapons. They also wore helmets that concealed the wearer's face with a one-way visor. The Galactic Empire Stormtrooper Corps would adopt the Sith Empire's mentality of eliminating the individuality in the average soldier. This was meant to create a much more disciplined and orderly force, but also makes them more intimidating and inhuman to their enemies. In ancient times, the Persian army fielded a unit of professional warriors named Immortals. The individuality of the average soldier was suppressed in this unit, and every time the unit suffered a casualty, it was quickly replaced so that the Immortals could maintain a constant strength of 10,000. A few years after the Mandalorian Wars ended, the Great Galactic War would start. The Sith Empire would attack the Republic directly and not through some proxy force. Lessons learned from previous conflicts meant that both the Republic and Sith Empire already had their own combat suits ready to go. The Republic standard armor kit covered the entire body of the trooper. Havoc Squad, a Republic Special Forces unit that fought during the Great Galactic War, had an armor design that is very reminiscent of the armor used by Phase 2 clone troopers. The helmet they wore even looked like a clone scout trooper helmet. This heavy armor worn by Republic troopers was rated against blaster bolts and also explosive force. On the other side of the battle line, you had the most recent rendition of the Sith Trooper. Gone were the elegant lines and reflective surfaces. These Imperial soldiers wore dark black armor and a flared-out helmet that is reminiscent of Imperial Stormtrooper helmets. For thousands of years, the armor used by both the Sith and the Empire wouldn't really change all that much. Here's a photo of Darth Bane fighting with the Gloomwalkers, an infantry unit associated with the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness. Notice the helmeted individual behind him. Their armor design and color scheme are very similar to the Bad Batch. As many of you might know, Darth Bane would eventually try to destroy the Brotherhood of Darkness and take the Sith into hiding. This period of time would be known as the Rule of Two, and it would begin right around the time of the Ruusan Reformation. The Old Republic, tired of constant war for more than a few thousand years, decided to disarm its federal military and remove the Jedi from command positions. With the Sith now reportedly gone, the Republic was more worried about economic and cultural development. And so the galaxy would enter a golden age, whereas the military-industrial complex would suffer through a dark age. During this time period, military contractors had to rely on planetary defense force contracts and corporate security contracts. But as long as there were Sith like Palpatine running around, there can really be no peace for the galaxy. The creation of the clone army would be done in complete secrecy. In an effort to keep Sith plans away from the Jedi and other prying eyes, the Kaminoans were contracted for the job, not only because of their skill, but because they tended to be xenophobic and isolationist in nature. When their planetary system was taken off of Republic star charts, there were hardly any protests at all. The Kaminoans were master cloners, but because of this secrecy, they had to take on jobs that they normally wouldn't. The Phase 1 clone trooper armor was famously known for its discomfort at the joint areas. It just wasn't designed for human ergonomics. The Kaminoan armor smiths would base the clones' armor primarily on Mandalorian armor worn by Jango Fett. I think the Kaminoans realized, just like the old Republic all those years ago, that the Mandalorians kind of know what they're doing when it comes to building armor. The Phase 1 Clone Trooper armor was a perfect mixture between maneuverability and protection, and had plenty of modular options that could be bolted on. The Kaminoans also would add their own flair to the design by using special infrared paint that can only be seen by species who can see in that spectrum. This is the real reason why Clone Trooper armor looks white to the human eye. Phase 2 Clone Trooper armor would be updated for comfort, and we begin to see the helmet look more and more similar to the eventual Stormtrooper design. Once the Clone Wars was finished and the Clone Troopers emerged victorious, their white armor became a symbol of the Republic's power and strength. Palpatine wanted to tap into the legends of the clones without actually having to front all of the costs for the clone army. Just a few years after the rise of the Empire, the TK Stormtrooper program would be rolled out. They were the prototypes for the Stormtrooper Corps, and interestingly enough, their armor design comes from some of the earliest Stormtrooper concept art from Ralph McQuarrie. The TK Troopers would return to the classic all-white clone trooper look, no identification markers, no paint or anything like that. And that's because when a Stormtrooper puts his helmet on, they no longer represented themselves, they became a representative and enforcer for the Empire. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.